Okay, well, first of all, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us. On behalf of the PD and A Committee of AFP Calgary, I just want to thank you all for coming in and letting you know that this meeting is being recorded. And therefore, you also consent to being recorded as well. Please take a second to find the square of Kara Turson. She is our chapter administrator, and she's also listed as the AFP Calgary admin. Please message her if you have any technical issues or questions. And we've also muted everyone by default, so we won't be disrupted by latecomers. Please remain muted during the presentations and input your questions for our panelists into the chat box. So we have a great panel of experts to share with you today. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Derek Fraser to welcome them.
And you may have been muted. Everyone got muted in that process.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As Tyler said, my name's Derek Fraser, along with Wayne Steer. We approached our friends at Giving Tuesday with the assistance and prodding of Derek Bechtold a few months ago to do a Giving Tuesday event of a different variety, if you will. And our core today is to learn beyond our provincial borders, our city borders, and our national borders, and learn from others in the world who have embraced Giving Tuesday in a way that we think is worth sharing. So just a little history. My involvement with Giving Tuesday occurred when I was chair of the AFP Canadian Council in 2013. Which today has evolved into AFP Canada, as we all know. And AFP Global at the time was the founding partner of the 92nd Street Y effort to launch Giving Tuesday in 2012. And by virtue of that, in 2013, the Give3 Foundation embraced the idea of bringing this movement to Canada. And as a founding partner, AFP, we elected to assist and spread the word out across the country. And so in my role at the Canadian Council, that was part of that. I was delighted to begin the process with our sector leaders here in Calgary. And, you know, we didn't maybe launch as quickly and as actively as we had hoped, but you know, over the years, in the last 7 years, we've seen some success over the years involving our mayor and other media sources and other partners, and Wayne will go into that in a little bit. But what we recently did was Wayne and I were invited to join a global summit hosted by Giving Tuesday Global last July, which brought all the countries of the world, which I think are 70 plus, give or take now, and which is a fantastic forum for sharing of ideas. And it was through that experience that Wayne and I realized that we were maybe not stepping up to the plate as well as we could here in Calgary, and that there are others in the world doing fantastic work. And we were needing to share some of that around community building versus just a new revenue event or an appeal. We needed, how can we get this into the bloodstream of the Calgary community and our sector? So we came up with this event to bring that information to you. So I'm delighted today to have Woodrow Rosenbaum, who I've worked with almost from the beginning in 2013. And Woodrow has some Calgary history as well. He may or may not share, but he's the Chief Data Officer for Giving Tuesday Global. So he's right on top of all the stats, most recently from our December 1st event. And then joining us is Anita Gallagher from Mexico, who's the director of Innova Social in Mexico, and has also served on the Giving Tuesday Global Board. And along with ZJ Jala, who's a senior business systems and analyst for Geisinger Health Plan, and is a global leader in Giving Tuesday for Liberia, and brings an African view that I think most of us will be quite interested in hearing about. So welcome all to our guests, and thank you for joining us today. And I'll hand it over to Woodrow to give us some insights.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks for having me. And I've been officially outed as a former and briefly former Calgarian. And I haven't actually been back to Calgary now since the last time we had a Giving Tuesday meeting there. So it's been a while, but at this point, I would very happily come and visit. I've been in this room. I was just saying earlier, I've been in this room for a year now. I'm looking forward to going somewhere else. I'm going to share my screen. I just want to say, I'm going to give kind of an overview of some of the global perspective on Giving Tuesday and how it's grown. Some of this will be some of the data insights that we've gathered now measuring Giving Tuesday and generosity and giving in general for a number of years. Feel free to interrupt. If you have some questions, throw them in the chat. Sometimes it's easier, particularly if I've got a chart up and you're not sure what it says. This is a reasonably small group. It's fairly intimate, so I'm happy to answer any questions as we go. I'll be real brief on the kind of Giving Tuesday overview because I think probably people are pretty familiar. Giving Tuesday was launched in 2012 in the US with a very simple idea that after Black Friday and Cyber Monday, these days for consumption and consumerism, that we could have a day for giving. And it didn't really have ambitions beyond the US. It didn't have ambitions to be the kind of incredibly broad movement that it has become. It was just simply a thought. What if we had a day for giving? And so since then, it has evolved into this, into what frankly began as mostly a nonprofit organization driven kind of fundraising moment. It evolved fairly rapidly into something broader than that. An opportunity for people to celebrate and express generosity in all of its forms. And the fact that it was a co-created movement, that there was no right or wrong way to do it, that it could be, that it was created by the people and the organizations and the groups and the communities that participated in it. It then began to reflect each of those communities and those viewpoints and the ways that people wanted to express their giving. And that meant in many, many different ways. This idea was a very simple platform and really tapped into something that turns out is a fairly universal human value, that generosity is generative and that it is open to all of us. And this is an interesting, just kind of visual representation of that. There are actually more global movements that are now than there are on this map. But one of the interesting things about Giving Tuesday as a concept is it was never distinctly branded. There was no guidelines people had to follow, and communities and countries around the world could just pick it up and make it what they wanted to. And yet everybody spontaneously adopted the same iconography. And I think this is a really clear expression of how Giving Tuesday operates. It's all about tools and not rules. But at the same time, there's a global connected community here that is creating a community of practice around inspiring and leveraging and motivating generosity that we see through lines and we learn from one another. And although it is not a uniform thing, we see the similarities across these different cultures quite clearly. And the fact that they've each chosen this heart logo, starting with Canada, we were the first ones outside the US, to create a Giving Tuesday logo and launch a campaign, and every country after that has adopted the same thing, which I think is really telling. There are, as Derek was saying, now 75 official country movements in Giving Tuesday. So like the Giving Tuesday Canada movement, this is just groups who have come together to say they will steward the movement in their country, help to provide resources and best practices and learning, and a platform for the people in that country and connections to those around the world, so that we have that opportunity for cross-cultural peer learning. There is Giving Tuesday activity in every country of the world, just grassroots, spontaneous people and organizations and businesses getting involved everywhere. In 75 countries, there are official movements. And there are also a number of now globally cross-cutting sub-movements. So in the US and in Canada, one of the key ways Giving Tuesday began to grow was through these community campaigns like we have in Calgary and Edmonton, like we have in Toronto and Montreal. And what evolved from that was communities of cause and culture that came together. And in Canada, I think the first one was a coalition of science centers across Canada that created a community campaign. And that has now turned into many, many other examples, as well as some that are global in nature, like Giving Tuesday Spark, which started as Giving Tuesday Kids. And that was launched by, and at the time, she was an 11-year-old girl who had heard about Giving Tuesday and was inspired. That's her right there, Chloe in the top right. She was inspired to try to get 1 million kids around the world to do good. And this has now grown into something very broad with lots of youth engagement, youth-driven initiatives. And that's really what's key about Giving Tuesday Spark. There's a team that supports it globally, small team. We have small teams at every part of Giving Tuesday. But the initiatives themselves are motivated by, created, and run by those youth leaders themselves. So Giving Tuesday has gotten pretty big. And yes, that includes as a day for people to make donations. It's also, though, a day for people to get involved in supporting their communities in lots of other ways. And it also goes well beyond the day of Giving Tuesday now. There are activities and coalitions and networks of people who are inspiring, motivating, and learning about generosity every day of the year. And some of that is just about the continued capacity building that this network does. And some of it is more directly activation oriented. And I'll talk about what some of those things for 2021 are in a moment. So my role as the Chief Data Officer at Giving Tuesday began to be about measuring Giving Tuesday. And I'll talk about that primarily today. But really, that has grown into something much more in depth. We are looking at generosity, how to motivate it, and what are its impacts outside the context of Giving Tuesday, looking at every day of the year and looking at all of the best practices as well as the trends in giving. Giving Tuesday is a really important and interesting opportunity to experiment and understand some of those trends and what works. And that, I think, is important. We learn from our observation of giving and generosity, and that helps us feed that into the Giving Tuesday network for effect. But we also use Giving Tuesday as a lens on people's generosity and giving preferences. And right from the beginning, one thing was really clear and really important to understand, and that is that most people who participate in Giving Tuesday do more than one thing. So in a lot of countries, the most common way people participate is by giving money. But most of those donors also take some other action. And although giving money is the most common behavior, only giving money is the least common behavior. So we think this is critically important. This in 2020 was particularly important to understand because there were financial strains on a lot of people, and there was concern about people not being able to give the way they might have in the past or might want to. But also, I think, just generally speaking, it's really a best practice to understand that given the opportunity, our supporters will choose to take more than one action. They want to do lots of different things. And we tend in the nonprofit sector to take an approach that is too transactional and not experiential enough. And we should not be thinking about these other ways that we can ask people to engage as a burden, a solicitation. We should be looking at this as more opportunities for people to express their personal agency to make the change that they want to see. And when we do that, we end up in a relationship with people that's highly inspiring and happens to be a really good way of getting money from them. I mentioned that giving money is the most common behavior in, well, particularly in the global north. In the US and Canada, that's certainly the case. So this is the sort of, this charts the primary activity of Giving Tuesday participants in a number of different countries that we measure. So here we've got all of these countries. The most common way people get involved is by donating. Now, again, all those donors are also doing other things. But it's also interesting to see that in other places, we have people getting involved in different ways. And the primary way that people engage in some places, even places that have very strong donation results, is sometimes other things. Sometimes it's volunteering, sometimes it's advocacy. And so we have, our global teams use this to kind of learn about how their movements can grow. But what we see this also as an opportunity to understand that we have other ways of bringing people into a community of givers and activating them around generosity beyond just always asking them for money. And that if we think about this not in terms of it's an either or, it opens up a lot of potential to maintain the relationship with those donors and supporters for the long term. I see there's some stuff in the chat. You guys feel free to interrupt me if there are any questions that come up. This is I just wanted to use an example of a campaign, because the other thing that we're seeing a lot on Giving Tuesday is coalitions of organizations that are coming together in communities to really step up. And what's very encouraging about that is that I'm sure everybody is fairly familiar with the feeling of competition that often exists within the sector. We have this idea that comes from a scarcity mentality that we're all in competition for the same dollar. And what we see from Giving Tuesday is that not only is it possible to make the pie bigger when we act together, but also that organizations coming together within communities and for specific cause areas have a huge opportunity to grow their collective results, and that the net impact of their collaboration is bigger than what they can get when they're in competition. So in North Texas had two fairly big campaigns. In 2020 was the first year we had two official days of Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday Now was the response to the COVID crisis. And there was an outpouring of support in countries around the world, and Canada and the US were no exception. Lots of money raised, lots of people doing lots of things, a real spike in generosity, and not just for kind of frontline response organizations, but for organizations and causes in communities for all kinds of purposes. And in the community foundation in the community foundations in Texas and the United Way of Dallas partnered with the Dallas Cowboys for their Giving Tuesday Now campaign. And for them, it was an opportunity to take some existing planned activities and come together and try to make them that much bigger. And they blew through their campaign goals. And this is in an environment where the norm, right, for sort of big institutional organizations in a city that have giving days planned, right? The norm in our industry is to think about these things competitively. And when they came together to do this cooperatively, they exceeded what their combined goals were. And so what we're seeing more and more is that community movements for Giving Tuesday are these coalitions of organizations that would otherwise be doing activities anyway. United Ways are very common, community foundations are very common, because they find that when they pool together the resources of all of the organizations in their community, they all do better.
Woodrow, could I interrupt you just for a second? There was a question. I'm sorry I missed it.
Yeah, go ahead. Great.
The question was from Brian. Do we know how much the impact numbers are in Alberta or Canada?
Yes. So I'll cover the sort of the total Canadian numbers. So we have some idea, not a very good breakdown within Canada. Although the last time we got good numbers on a breakdown by region, it was it was more or less as you'd expect by population. The only real outlier when we did have enough the data to make that analysis was Nova Scotia, where Nova Scotia performed. And actually, interestingly, Nova Scotia doesn't have a very high per capita donation rate, but their Giving Tuesday results were very high on a per capita basis. Nova Scotia also is has a superstar leader. One of the very first community campaigns was in Halifax and has the only province-wide campaign. So it's a mature campaign, been going for a long time. So has a lot going for it. But it's a great example of what can happen when you put that effort in over the long term, and in their case, province-wide. They got a really good result. Other than that, it breaks down more or less as you'd expect by geography. I've got a slide coming up, but their Giving Tuesday in 2020 broke another record for Canada. In Canada, we can only measure, we only have estimate on the online giving. We don't have enough data inputs to really get a good handle on the offline. Just like in the US, offline giving exceeds there's more offline giving than online. There was about $37 million donated online in Canada on Giving Tuesday in 2020. And roughly 6 million people participate in some way in Giving Tuesday in Canada across the country. But it's interesting. I'll talk about this in a moment. Going into Giving Tuesday 2020, there are a lot of people who thought, well, this will be the year when things flatten or are soft, because there aren't as many volunteer opportunities, events can't happen, people are going to be worried about money. There was a lot of pessimism in the sector, not just about Giving Tuesday, but about the entire kind of end of year season. What we were seeing going into the last quarter of 2020 was a lot of what we thought were very encouraging indicators. And Giving Tuesday, at any rate, in Canada was huge. I think it remains to be seen what Q4 in Canada is going to look like, but I'll talk about that right away. So this is how we looked at giving in 2020. We look at actual volunteer and donation trends. So this is directly measured donation transactions and volunteer matching data. We do a lot of survey work looking at attitudes and values and how they intersect with other things like concern about COVID and financial security. And we look at the conversation in social media so that we can kind of contextualize this and get a holistic view of what are the motivators for giving, what are the trends and indicators of either risk or opportunity. And in 2020, what we saw was that philanthropic sentiment, the kind of motivation and desire to give, was very, very high. And as always correlates with actual giving behavior, but really important to understand that people were highly motivated to give. Now, financial security played an important role in people's actual giving behavior, and in that if they were feeling insecure about their financial situation, they tended to give less. And then COVID concern about the impacts of COVID also correlated with people's giving. And those two things are inversely correlated. So the more concerned you are about COVID, the less financially secure you feel. Those things tended to relate. But that concern about community, that concern about crisis, concern about justice, these things were driving giving levels beyond what was being suppressed so far by financial insecurity. And in the U.S., it was exhibited with a real uptick in giving at all levels, but particularly in this grassroots giving category. So people giving less, the donations under $250 were way up. And that was the biggest driver of that was in the $51 to $250 range. But we also saw a reversal of the trend below that. So small donors and small donations way, way up. The net result in the US, we see on 2020 was about an 11% increase over 2019 in total dollars raised. A significant portion of that driven by people giving more often, which was really encouraging to see and really spoke to the fact that people were highly motivated to give. Now, when asked in advance, people were pretty pessimistic about their giving. And in 2020 and early 2020, when people are asked to predict whether they would give more or less in both the US and Canada, they tended to say no, right? There was a lot of pessimism. The thing is, I think a number of organizations and institutions, not sector institutions, kind of took that as, well, that's going to be the reality. And they reacted to that as if giving was going to be down. The problem with it is when you were asking people about their expectations on whether they were give, they would think, well, yeah, things are bad. There's a crisis and I may not have as much money. So I think I'll give less. But when they were actually asked to give, they thought, well, there's a crisis, things are bad, and people need help. And so they were highly responsive. There was very good conversion rates. And so I think a lot of organizations kind of missed an opportunity because they were expecting people to live up to their word. But in reality, it was the difference between asking people the abstract about their giving and asking people for a gift were two very different things. So then, and the other thing we've noticed in 2020, which was different from previous years, is that this conversation around giving and around Giving Tuesday is really focused on the themes of community. And so this is what's inspiring people right now, is giving back in their community in lots of different ways. And so, yes, that includes donations and includes donations to nonprofits, but also includes mutual aid networks. It includes person-to-person giving. It includes volunteering. It includes giving food and goods and helping neighbors. There's just a myriad ways that people are expressing their generosity. And in particular, when people are feeling like maybe they don't have as much money to give, what we see is that their giving behavior remains fairly constant. So they find other ways to give if they feel like they don't have the money. And the more they do those other things, the more likely they are to donate. So there's a real generative opportunity of people's giving behavior in that way. Just looking at the donation pattern, this is what it looked like in the beginning of the year. And this slump that we see in the year really corresponded to, in particular, leading up to the end of April, really corresponded to not people not giving, but mostly about the nonprofit organizations not having the capacity to pivot. And we definitely saw a rising tide, particularly in the US. We saw more donations, we saw more donors, we saw more acquisition. But there were definitely winners and losers. And it wasn't by the kind of cause category you would expect. It's not like health organizations. Arts organizations definitely had a problem, but it had more to do with their business model and the fact that they weren't in a position to pivot rapidly to other things. And they were very dependent on events. In Canada, I know that health research organizations are having a hard time because their whole business model is so dependent on big events and runs and walkathons, that kind of thing. And so the small organizations were disproportionately hit by the effects of the downturn in 2020. And the ones that were able to navigate this were the ones who could leverage things like Giving Tuesday, give them an opportunity to tap into the fact that people are looking for community giving opportunities, and the ones who had an engagement that wasn't just about money. I mentioned $36.1 million raised online on Giving Tuesday. So I mentioned that, Giving Tuesday is more than just a day, both in terms of the practice of generosity and capacity building, but there's also, we're rolling out a strategy of engagement throughout 2021 called Giving Every Tuesday. And rather than go back to a kind of single additional day activation moment like we did with Giving Tuesday Now in 2020, we're doing this theme-based weekly engagement that organizations and communities can get behind, and the Canadian team is going to be kind of leading the activation. Each country is sort of taking a series of days where they're going to take the lead on activating and provide toolkits and resources. Earth Day is one of those days for Canada. Mental Health Month and pivoting around May 18th will be another that Canada is leading, and Random Acts of Kindness on July 27th. This, I think, is really going to be key. It's a really good opportunity to re-engage givers without having to go out and ask them for money again. And again, like, those activities tend to be really good fundraisers. But the important thing here being to recognize that people have lots to give, and put that agency in their hands to express it the way that they want, and that this Giving Every Tuesday approach is really our opportunity to provide our nonprofit community with lots of connection points to help, that, you know, sort of provides a scaffold that you can plug into where it works for your organization, either by theme or by activity. So any other questions before I hand this back?
None in the chat.
Okay, great. Well, I'm here and happy to answer any other questions, and be good to get some practical examples of how some of these campaigns run around the world.
Thanks for that data dump there, Woodrow. I know there's a lot in those numbers, and I'm sure you could speak for a long time about it, but thanks for collapsing it and making it easy to digest. We're now going to invite Anita from Mexico to take the stage, and welcome, Anita. Delighted to have you with us, and she's going to share some of their experience that she's been a part of in that part of the world.
Hi, everyone. I'm wondering if I can share my screen quickly. There we go. I just wanted to give you 3 quick examples of different things that we've been seeing in Giving Tuesday in Mexico. One of our big themes here has been encouraging experimentation and encouraging participation, so that we're sending the message to organizations, but also to schools and businesses that take part, that Giving Tuesday is really about bringing in new people to giving, rather than focusing on the dollar amounts or how much is given on the day. And so I love this example. This is an organization who work in the west coast of Mexico. They're called Pasitos. And it's a really good international story, because actually the guy that you see on the left-hand side on the video, he's British. And the reason they got involved in Giving Tuesday was because they work closely with an organization in Canada, and the members of that organization said, guys, why are you not doing something for Giving Tuesday? You need to get involved. And the initiative that they came up with was the Pasitos map. So Yo Soy Pasitos, or I'm with Pasitos. And their main call to action, and what Chris came out in the video and asked people to do, was to get their name on the map. If they were a supporter of Las Pasitos, to sign up to be in the map, and they wanted to have 130 people on the map, because there's 130 children in the center that they work with. And so they wanted to create this sense of community, that there's people all over the world that are there to support the kids going through their rehabilitation and then their processes in Casa Conner. And then they also wanted to add on to that an additional goal of fundraising, because they wanted to raise money to buy the essential items for the kids. This is right in the middle of the pandemic last year, the pandemic, when things were really tough. And it went really well. And you can see actually in the map, I just gave you a little click of the map of Canada, US, and Mexico. But if you were to zoom out, you'd see that people signed on from Australia, New Zealand, from the UK as well. And his family in the UK got involved. And what I think was the real success of this campaign was that people did feel this sense of community, and that people did feel that their participation was more important than just the transactional side of giving money. And we're very much in that transition in Mexico about spreading this message that what Woodrow was saying, people want to give in many ways. And when we treat people just as sources of money, we're not making most benefit of all of the talents and things that they can give to us. And at the same time, we're not giving them a fulfilling relationship, or we're not giving them a reason to come back and work with us. And so talking to Chris afterwards and getting his feedback about how this campaign went, they did raise the money, but they were much more excited about having this network of people that they can keep in touch with, And they were much more excited as well about how they were able to use the technology. They'd never done anything like this. He had never stood in front of the camera and recorded a video of himself. And he had never used Google Maps and done this kind of interactive initiative before. And so really, it was a really big learning experience for the organization as a whole as well. So they have a bigger community of global and people who want to contribute. They were able to raise the funds, but they've really grown as an organization through participating in Giving Tuesday. And so for us, that's a big success story. It's a small success story in terms of the actual impact, but it's a big success story in terms of what we think Giving Tuesday is all about and the type of way that we want to encourage other people to get involved. And then I wanted to just give you some other examples from businesses. We also have universities and businesses. It's something that we're trying to grow because we really are thinking about Giving Tuesday as not just this day when the nonprofits are all out in full force, but a day when more people and new people find ways to get involved with the causes that they care about. And so we love it when more and more businesses come on board. And this was a business from the Yucatan Peninsula, and they run like taco shops and fast food joints. And so the large number of people that they're working with are, you know, working class people working in service jobs. And they printed out this big, I can't forgotten the word in English, a lona, and with all of these different things that you can give. So, you know, just looking at the screen, it's give joy, share care, give something nice, sort your rubbish or your garbage, ceder el lugar is give way in traffic, just lots of random examples of ways that you can give. They created a company video where 2 or 3 people on the staff encouraged people to get involved in Giving Tuesday and give whatever they could that day. And then they took all these, this was like a roadshow. They took this big thing around all of the different sites and places of work and took photos of the staff engaging and talking about the ways that they could give in Giving Tuesday. So again, it's just one of those examples of non-monetary giving where you can encourage people to give, but in a way that makes sense to them. And certainly in the middle of a pandemic, so many people here were earning 50%. We haven't had any government support in terms of wage support or support for small businesses in any way whatsoever. So by changing the message and focusing on what everybody can give and that generosity is manifested in so many different ways, we find that to be just really relevant and inspiring. And another example of how you can take that further on was a big company. This is a big national, if not international company called Lala, and they make dairy products. And they have a huge foundation and they have the capacity to go big on social media. You can see the great design of things that they did to get the word out there. But the stories that I loved coming out of Lala Foundation's work, it was the sense of autonomy and purpose that they gave to all of their different staff members. So what they did was in every place in Mexico where they have a production facility or a distribution center, they have committees, and they let each committee decide what their action would be for Giving Tuesday. And so each local group could decide, well, we want to help an orphanage or we want to help an elderly people's home. You can see in the top picture where there's a nun, I think that was an elderly people's home. On the right-hand side, one of the groups decided to help the people that are waiting on the train. I don't know if you've heard of this big train, it's called La Bestia. And it's one of the trains that a lot of immigrants will use to get up to the northern border with the USA. And the people there are in such difficult circumstances, so they chose to help them. And one of the stories that I loved the most was one of the groups, they knew that the company would give them dairy produce, you know, the milk and the cream and the yogurts and everything to bring as an in-kind donation. But they didn't want to just be ambassadors for the brand, shall we say. And so what they did was they organized themselves in the workplace to sell all of the merchandise that the company already has, you know, mugs, key rings, pens, mouse mats. But with the money that they raised from that, it ended up being between $300 and $400. They decided that they wanted to help a home for girls. And they got in touch with the home and they said, what do you need the most? And the home came back and said, you know what, the girls need underwear and they need period products and they need those type of things that nobody else is giving us throughout the year. And so they used the money. They had gone through this effort of selling these, you know, merchandising things within the company, but the money that they raised from that, they were able to purchase those items and deliver them directly to the home on Giving Tuesday. And that just, you know, for us in the team, we love the way that Lala does have this big corporate plan for how to participate in Giving Tuesday, but we love that they left it in the hands of each of these groups of people, what was going to be the most meaningful way for them to participate. And there was that sense of freedom and autonomy and empowerment about everybody getting involved in a way that makes most sense to them. Those are just a couple of the stories that we have from Mexico. I have a feeling that because of the socioeconomic context of where we're living and where we're working, we have an abundance of more non-economic, non-financial giving stories. You know, Giving Tuesday in Mexico does make an impact on online giving. It does make an income on resources that are given that day. But what we find most meaningful is this message that everybody can find a way to get involved, and everybody can find a way that's meaningful for them, be it the community they live in or the causes that they care about.
Thank you, Anita. That's fascinating. Great stories. Appreciate you sharing those. And obviously, by your own enthusiasm, I can see how they've affected you, and you know, going forward, how creative you'll be, because there are no limits now. You know, basically, the door is open for almost anything. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to switch to Jala and share some of the experiences from the African continent, I believe.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I will also share my screen. You will notice there are some similarities here between what Anita just mentioned and what I'm about to talk about quickly. So I'm from Liberia. I represent Giving Tuesday movement in Liberia. And most of what we do, in fact, 100% of the work we do in Liberia is volunteer-based. We focus entirely on non-financial giving for two reasons, right? One, the resources, financial resources, are not existing amongst most Liberians. It's a very poor country. It is a third world country. They're still bouncing back from brutal civil wars. So we have always focused on volunteering and creating community building in different parts of the country. However, I mean, the screen I'm sharing now, most of you are aware with any community building projects, these are some of the goals or the factors that, yes, can you hear me?
We're not seeing the screen.
Yeah, we don't have your share yet, Jala.
Oh, no, that's not good. Let's try this again. Let me know when you can see now. I apologize for that.
That looks good.
All right. All right, thank you. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so the screen I'm sharing right now pretty much shows usually the goals for community building, right? Whether you're in Liberia or any parts of the world, some people have maybe 10 of them, 6 of them. So what we do, we look at these different factors or goals. We throw ideas on the wall and we determine if any of those ideas can help us meet these goals for the communities we want to serve. We consider the idea an idea that's going to stick, not for us, but for those communities. But the project I want to talk about today, it has to do more with focusing on deepening connections. And the way I view deepening connections in these communities, I consider it those whispering questions, whether you are a kid or an adult. We all have those questions we whisper to ourselves sometimes. Does anyone care? How am I going to get through this problem? Those sort of questions that we're not really comfortable to share. Our community building project focuses on really going deeper and answering those questions without asking those individuals who are asking those questions, right? So my personal favorite, which is not something that the entire team does, I also like to ask, are these ideas even unique or unconventional, right? When you're in places with no resources, you want to make sure your ideas are impactful, they are meaningful to the people you're serving, but at the same time, if they are unconventional, they are able to gain some sort of traction for the communities you're serving in. All right. So what did we do? We went into communities that look like the screen you're seeing now, very, very poor communities, places we do work all of the time. We spoke to several women in these communities, and we started to ask them, what are some of the challenges? Just as Anita just said, when the young women or the folks in those communities said, in Mexico, we are looking for products for females, right? Same idea, same concept. We talked to these women in various communities, and we noticed most of them really wanted to remember some of those really interesting times or happy moments in their lives before the Civil War. And for most of them, it was just a picture. My wedding picture got missing because my house was burned down, right? Or everything was stolen from me and I lost all of my favorite pictures. So we focused on creating something that these women could relate to. We identified about 60 plus women in various slum communities. We told them that on day one, we will have a conversation with you that you can share with your families and friends. And basically, we contacted people in the United States, in Ghana, in various countries, Liberian-based organizations, even in Canada as well, asking them to send wedding dresses that they weren't using anymore. We wanted to recreate those wedding moments for those women. So those wedding dresses were sent to us in the United States, and our team shipped it to Liberia. In Liberia, we went to those communities, met with those women. We showed them the dresses. We took their sizes. They were very excited. These are countries where men are not usually in doing anything like this. So number one, it was strange for me to be there doing that, right? But even more interestingly, it was strange to see how many support we saw from males just in the community, whether it was their husbands, their uncles, their brothers. People showed up. We dressed these women without no professional help at all. There were no makeup artists, stylists. It was just our team doing these things. We provided everything for these women, from the hair to the toes. The only thing that wasn't new that they wore were the dresses they wore. And here are some of the pictures of those women on the day of. The previous pictures I showed, you see that most of these women faces just kind of explain what sadness looks like, right? They were sad. Some of them had not even smiled probably for months. The challenges they go through, I can't even get through that right now. But putting these dresses on them and having them take their own picture with a professional photographer, paying for that, and later on taking those pictures and giving it to those women was one of the most inspiring thing I've ever seen. There were men who were crying, and that's not a culture where men are usually doing that. They show no sympathy. They show that they're indifferent. But these women were very happy. Um, I really love this story because one of the things that we learn from this is that when you do this community service work, there are several lessons that you can learn from this, right? We learn very quickly the difference between emotional value and money value or financial value, right? Equally, there are, benefits to both. But in communities like Liberia or many countries in Africa or even South America where poverty is very high, emotional value can be more of a healing and a long lasting value than even any financial giving. And that has been proven in Liberia over and over. We also learned that when you are inclusive, the impact of being inclusive, it's not just being inclusive on your website or on your social media website, but being inclusive throughout your program. Why in those communities being inclusive by seeing this kid on the next street and just asking them a question, how do you feel about this? Um, Inclusive on every level. When we do that, it makes our job even easier because there are more hands on deck. There are more people willing to help. Folks who don't have money are willing to even come by and say, hey, I just want to comment on your social media pages. We also notice that is a very good way for us to solve our own problems. This is something that I'm really big of, even beyond Giving Tuesday. It was one of the primary reasons for me joining Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday allows us, regardless of where you are, it allows you to solve your own problem or be a part of that solution. We don't see that with many organizations where folks come from so many places, especially in Africa, where all of the major work being done is coming from professionals from outside or resources from the outside. Those resources would not be sustainable. And COVID has been a clear example of that, where many of the organizations left during COVID, their staff left, and there were no resources to run these movements in Liberia and many African countries. But when you are giving us an opportunity or giving folks in those communities an opportunity to solve their own problems, you really don't have to worry about sustainability, right? Sustainability becomes organic. It is very easy to meet all of your sustainability goals because those folks are closer to the problems. They exist there. They know how those problems can be solved. And they also know how to tell the stories, even if it's not in a formal reporting format, right? Those are something that we're able to prove. For me, I really want to do more of this work, right? And all of the folks in Liberia who participated in this just really want to do more of this work. But one last thing I would share here, my first screen talks about really deepening connections, and we did that. In Giving Tuesday, I think we used the term unexpected leaders, right? Whether I consider myself one of those unexpected leaders. If Giving Tuesday did not exist, I probably would not be doing more of this work where I am now. But because of Giving Tuesday, I'm able to bring ideas to the table that are not vetted and prevented from being implemented. They're implemented everywhere. And I really love that about Giving Tuesday. I tell folks that Giving Tuesday is kind of like a buffet you enter where there are ingredients for food from any country, right? You can walk in and pick any ingredients from that buffet table and create your own menu of food. Adam, and that's what Giving Tuesday is. We are able to do whatever we want to do that's more meaningful, more impactful in Liberia with or with our resources. So I'm happy that I'm able to share this with you. The screen you're looking at, the woman on the left is in the middle with the blue tank top. She is legally blind. She has 8 children. All of her kids are standing around her with some of our team members. This woman called us after these events and decided that she wanted to be the one running this program going forward in her communities, in all of the communities. Even during COVID, she's having meetings with people and hoping that we will return to do more of this. The young lady on her right also had joined in to do that. So we've identified unexpected leaders without even making that our focus. And I think from that alone, we know that this work created the impact we needed it to create. It was meaningful. And it tells people that we don't have to always wait for all of the financial resources to arrive to solve our problems. So I'd like to stop there and just say thank you. There are millions of other examples, as Anita said, but we won't talk about that today for the sake of time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. That was awesome. Great to see that work and seeing those unintended consequences from the investment of time and good people coming forward. So we all at all of our organizations love when that happens, that spontaneity. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to move over to Wayne and have Wayne join me now as we talk about maybe more quickly than we were anticipating. Some of the work here in Canada that's inspired us that I think we can bring to Calgary, or at least maybe take from their playbook. I'm just going to share my page as well here. Let me just have to go do that first, I think. Sure.
Just before you share, Derek, I'm not going to go into too much of St. Mary's. I'll let you do that, but I just want to give kind of a recap of what we've done in Calgary in the past and what's possible in the future. So we've done things like From the Top of the Bow was 1 year. We've also had it in our gymnasium at Fresh Start 1 year. Last year we had it live, was at our new Calgary Library, public library downtown, which had a whole bunch of participants and was really successful. This past year, because of COVID, we did one virtually with Andrea McManus, who was talking about giving and her experience, but as the one of the first Canadian fellows, AFP Global Fellows from Canada. Last year was the first year, or this year is the first year for it. But some things that Woodrow talked about earlier, and also that Jella and Anita touched upon, is just the thinking outside of the box type of things and getting people involved, getting people engaged, doing things that are a little bit out of the ordinary, not concentrating on the financial aspect. And one thing that Woodrow had mentioned before and mentioned again today was the Dallas model, where the leaders in community got together and they didn't want to be the focal point of that Giving Tuesday. They wanted to be the tent, if you will, to invite others in and be part of the bigger picture and create something collectively that no one could do on their own. And I think that those opportunities are great opportunities for Calgary. Woodrow also mentioned Spark, which is the youth initiative to bring youth into it and get them involved. And Anita and Jala both mentioned that, more Anita probably. But we have a facility in Calgary, the others that are outside may not know about it, but TELUS Spark, which may lend itself naturally to creating something with respect to the Spark initiative and get youth more involved. And I know Derek and I have talked long about getting businesses involved, getting commercial involvement with Giving Tuesday. And there's a great example out of Eastern Canada or Central Canada with St. Mary's. And I think Derek is going to go into that very shortly as he shares his screen.
Yep.
And just before he starts, I just want to remind everybody that this is being recorded, so you can see it later on. So if you've been madly dashing to write notes down, you don't need to. It will be shared. So, Derek?
Yeah, just a little background. So Wayne and I both attended the Canadian Leaders Summit in Toronto in the last few years, and that opportunity brings the other community leaders together across Canada, and that offered a chance to share some ideas. And one that jumped out at me immediately was in St. Mary's, Ontario, which is sort of in the southwestern corner down near Windsor and Essex County, down in that part of the tobacco country, you might say. And their approach to Giving Tuesday was basically enlisting all the corporate support, something that, you know, we've driven off the membership of AFP and the charitable sector to drive it in Calgary, but in St. Mary's, and that might be due to the scale and the size of their community, but they're able actually to make the day very successful by approaching many of the businesses who, you know, all got involved. So if you look at the screen right now, you'll see all these different companies that got involved in their work, as well as the organizations that were also involved. So something, you know, just something that we can think about, I believe, in terms of moving our strategy here in Calgary forward. You know, they had, you know, some fantastic responses from people. Here they are signing the Giving Tuesday flag. Dr. Glitz and Associates and Veterinary and Tim Hortons. And so kind of cool to see that participation. They're giving out Purple Heart, or you can buy and donate and get a Purple Heart, which is part of the mental health effort. And obviously enlisting children and, you know, a confectioner. And then, you know, the weather, of course, anywhere in Canada in late November, early December is questionable. And so, but these kids were all dressed up, and they, this is part of the 2019 day. And so, you know, the engagement across the community is what I think is possible. And I think here in Calgary, we may not have reached as deep as we could to exercise and engage more parties to be a part of it. And obviously the schools are part of this effort in this community. And so, you know, just so everyone knows what the date is coming up, slip back into November, last day of November coming up this year. And so I think I'm just going to share and go back to our regular screen. I think there's an opportunity here in Calgary, and Wayne and I are happy to facilitate and bring others in to move Giving Tuesday into a new realm here in Calgary. And with our last few minutes, I'm going to just open up the floor and see if there's some questions, if anyone on the call would like to put forward, or Tyler, if you have any from the chat, or Kara's gotten some from her email.
Eric, maybe I'll just, I just wanted to comment on something you mentioned. The kind of the scale of St. Mary's is obviously very different from Calgary and Edmonton. What's I think interesting and that we can learn from that effort was that it was so untraditional, right? When our St. Mary's leaders came to present to at that first summit, they said, well, we didn't know anything about the nonprofit sector. So we just went and asked all the businesses if they would do a thing. And they had the businesses nominate the organizations that they wanted to support, right? And that's the beauty of Giving Tuesday, is that it doesn't follow this sort of prescriptive standard sector approach to things. You want to launch a Giving Tuesday campaign in a city and never talk to a single nonprofit, but engage all of them. There's a method for that, right? The St. Mary's folks did it because they weren't stuck in a paradigm that, right? They just went and did something. And, you know, yes, the scale, I mean, I don't think you're going to, St. Mary's got every single business in the city to get involved. That's probably not going to happen in a city the size of Calgary, but a similar approach was taken in Guelph, a little closer to Calgary size. But what was interesting there is what they did was they started with their nonprofit organizations and their schools and their university. And they said, look, if you can approach 2 businesses with this kit we give you, then you'll have done enough to help this campaign in our city. And they had a really good response from businesses just because they could distribute that effort across dozens of organizations in their community. And that approach is scalable and could help out. You know, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. So that picture of those kids showing up, because that was our St. Mary's leader in her store. Those kids were from a kindergarten class or grade 1 class or something, and their teacher brought them out in the middle of a snowstorm to come and deliver a thank you letter to her for starting Giving Tuesday in St. Mary's. It was just very moving. And again, just was about people giving any way that they wanted and could.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but before everyone leaves, we did have a promise to make a draw. So I want to thank all our panelists, Woodrow, Anita, Jala, and Wayne and Derek. Thank you so much for your insights today. I think we learned quite a bit. And I believe Kara has her bowl of names ready to go for one lucky winner for their charity, not for them specifically.
Yes, so everyone who purchased a ticket, their name is in here, and then I will follow up and we'll make arrangements. So a random draw. Lori Abernethy, you get to decide where your money goes to. I will reach out to you later today.
And please check your emails and keep in mind the dates. For April 8th is our upcoming Coffee and Conversation. And on the 14th, we have Connie Jacob presenting on enhancing mental health and wellness at the workplace and at home. So a couple more events coming your way through email. So stay tuned for those and register as soon as you can. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
I'd just like to say one last thing. Thank you, AFP Calgary Area Chapter, for putting this on, and particularly Tyler Wade. Thank you very much for making this possible, and Derek Bechtold for planting the seed a few months ago. So thank you all.
I appreciate all of you for putting in the work to make it happen.
Yeah.
Thanks all. Congratulations, Lori.
Anita. And
yes, congratulations, Lori. Thank you all participants. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
good day,
Bye
guys.
now.
Thank you. Bye.